Hi, everyone. Welcome to Horror in the Hedgerows. This is a three-part video lesson that is going to take you a little deeper than normal into the Second World War. And it's not that we care so much about how one single battle was fought, but what one battle picked out of hundreds of battles from the Second World War can tell us about the nature of the Second World War and to some degree the nature of ourselves. So let's get started with a little background. I am Mr. Boyle from Waite High School, and I had the opportunity about 6-7 years ago now to work with National History Day and the American Battle Monuments Commission to tell the story of my Uncle Paul, who's pictured up here with my great-grandmother. Paul was killed in Normandy in 1944 in an area called the Hedgerows that we're going to spend some time talking about. And I've actually spent most of my life since the age of 21, which is longer than I care to admit now, studying Paul's life and his death and what happened with his unit in the month of July 1944 when the 83rd Infantry Division took grievous casualties in a region of Normandy. National History Day and American Battle Monuments Commission came together in 2015, working together to the present day, doing a program called Understanding Sacrifice. And in the past several years, I've also worked with an organization called D-Day 2044 that's trying to keep the memory of D-Day and the Normandy invasion alive. To tell my uncle's story, they have done a magnificent job in trying to publicize the lessons created in the Understanding Sacrifice program by NHD and the ABMC. So let's get started a little bit on this story. You're looking at a map right now. I find it really useful when looking at maps sometimes to I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but I try to blur things out with my eyes. You know how if you try to focus too close to you and look at something far away, it's blurry? Or if you try to look at something close with far away vision, it's blurry? I really encourage you to look at this map and make it blurry with your own vision right now. And as I look down at my screen and I make it a little blurry, I try to just make out shapes. I try to make out patterns. Where is it darker than other places? What are the major shapes that I see in this map? And hopefully, as you guys look at this map, which is really 4 maps that I put together, 4 old Army maps that I put together, hopefully what you're picking out as you take kind of a fuzzy look at this, hopefully what you're picking out is that there's kind of a blob right here, right? And there's a blob over here, and then there's a really intensely, like a lot of lines. There's kind of a dark blob down here at the bottom right. And then you notice that there's kind of a difference in here. You notice that there's a spider up here, the center of a spider web up here, the center of another spider web down here, and that there's a couple of lines that seem to be bigger than most. One of those lines goes from this spider web to this spider web. Another line goes out this way, continues on this way. There's another line that goes down here and another big line that goes down here. As we look at this map, we try to figure out what exactly are we looking at? What are we looking for? And I'm going to give you a little background on this map. One of the things you're looking at here is a series of rivers. There's a larger river that comes through here, right above me. Over to this side, there's another river called the Tote River that kind of flows down from this spider web down towards the other one. This spider web up here at the top is a city called Carentan. And the spider web at the bottom is another very small, in America, we'd probably call it a small town called Perrier. And this line that connects the two is the not so creatively named Carentan-Perrier Road. We notice that these are the really the only two really important looking settlements on this map. Now, there are other settlements along the way. Now, I have to kind of zoom in here for myself. There's one right here called Saint-Denis. There's another one here called Auxerre. There's Saint-Georges up here, Saint-Germain here, Raid right here, Saint-Sebastian right here, Marchessu right here. One of the things you might notice about Marchessu is that it's on a peninsula. It has 2 small streams or rivers that go by it. So when we look at this, we know there are 2 bigger towns, a host of smaller towns, And then I want you to really look at how the land is being used here. One of the things you might notice is that there are a lot of things that might be roads here, right? A lot of ways that the land is split up irregularly into these very irregularly shaped patterns all over the place. You notice that those patterns get tighter when you get down here, that there are more of those small boxes. When you get over here, it's almost an infinite number of these small boxes of land. And those small boxes of land are what we're really going to focus on in this lesson. Each of those small boxes is a small battlefield. And we're going to talk about how those battlefields were created and how they presented a completely unique challenge in World War II. So if we were standing down in one of those little boxes, in one of those miniature battlefields, if we had the widest vision possible, this is what we'd be looking at. And just kind of take a look at what's going on here. You've obviously got a group of incredibly handsome people at the center. But then what else do you have here? Just kind of take it in for a second. Hopefully you're noticing that there is grass. This is pasture. This is where you would have cows and whatnot. Another thing you're hopefully noticing is the tree line in the back, that there are trees back there. And in a lot of ways, this picture that was taken in France, just outside of Carentan, this picture doesn't look that different from Northwest Ohio or Iowa or Indiana. This looks like lots of farm fields all over the United States. But we're going to look at a couple other pictures that are going to take us closer to this tree line, because that tree line is a lot different than most fields in the United States. This is what it looks like on the other side of that tree line. Now, this is not the specific other side of this tree line. This is actually a different set of hedgerows just a little ways away. But when you get on the other side of those trees, there's a road and another set of trees before you get to the next field that's just like this. And I want to take a look at this for a second. See what you notice at this road that goes between these little boxes or little battlefields, as we're going to call them. Look at what's special about this road. Now you're probably going to notice some pretty obvious things, right? It's not paved. There's no street lights. It doesn't appear to be very wide, correct? And then you're also going to notice that there's a little ditch on either side of the road, that it's dug down a little bit there. And what you're really going to notice is that the trees don't grow straight into the road level. The trees are at the top of a hill, okay? Those hills are what we really care about here, as we're going to read about in a second. Let's look at a couple more pictures real quickly. If we went to the top of this hill, okay, I go to the top of this hill to look back in that field where my friends were. This is what I'm looking through. Now, there's barbed wire put there by humans, but there's also nature's barbed wire. If you look at all of this holly and these other bramble that have grown here, these are all prickly bushes, okay? So if I wanted to crawl from this road over this little bitty hill into that field where my friends are, this is a tough thing to do, okay? I'm not able to just crawl over the top. I'm going to get caught on nature's barbed wire. I'm going to get caught on human-made barbed wire. This is going to be a really difficult thing to do just to get over a little bitty hill. Even if I'm wearing soldier stuff from World War II, I'm wearing the dungarees and I'm wearing the canvas, it's going to be really hard to get through this stuff. Finally, looking at this one, this is a very specific hedgerow that we're going to look at in greater detail in video in a couple minutes. These are the remains of one very specific hedgerow. And you notice that there is a valley in between the two humps of land. You see the trees up there that are spread apart. Even though when we look at this first picture, we might go, man, is this an easy place to fight? Okay, it's this big open space. My friends and I can fight all day long, even though I wouldn't fight with my friends. It looks like a pretty easy place to fight until you consider the fact that you have to get into that field first. And I want you to think about, how would this be advantageous to the defenders? Let's say I took this picture from the perspective of an American soldier running into this field and trying to capture this field. If you were the Germans, how would you defend it? Where would you be? How easy would it be for you to take me out as I'm running straight across this field heading for that tree line? Think about those things for just a little bit. These are the things that make the battle in the hedgerows a horror in the hedgerows. So we're going to stop for just a second and watch a quick video narrated by me 6 years and about 50 pounds ago from France, from the spot where my uncle died.
One of the deadliest mistakes of the war in Northern Europe was a mistake as simple as it was complex, a failure to understand what lay behind the beaches. In the main, that terrain was hedgerow like this, and you can easily see how this would favor the defending Germans. A defending German could hide in the hedge and wait for American troops to come into the open, where machine guns could break through, snipers could pick targets, and mortars could rain fire. Sergeant Paul Boyle was killed here, shot twice by a German sniper, once wounding him as he shouted to the men of his machine gun squad not to give up, and the second shot was immediately fatal. Some companies in Boyle's division lost as many as 90% of their men in this terrain until changes in technology and tactics made breakout possible.
Things aren't always what they seem. Sometimes a place that looks like it could be an easy place to fight is going to be the toughest place to fight. So let's talk a little bit more about the hedgerows. This document here comes from the American Battle Monuments Commission and National History Day lesson plan, Horror in the Hedgerows. I'm going to read it to you guys, but you can read it along, or you can pause me if you want, if you don't want to hear my annoying voice for a little bit. What are the hedgerows? The land behind the beaches that American forces assaulted on June 6, 1944 is today beautiful, rolling countryside. But the very features that make it beautiful are the features that made it terrible territory for an invader to attack. The countryside was defined by multiple winding rivers, narrow farm lanes, and the tree and shrub framed fields of the hedgerow country, known locally as the Norman Bocage. Hedgerows are small man-made earthen walls that surround a field. The hedgerows in Normandy date back to Roman times, when they were used to enclose pastures and mark property lines. Each hedge is generally between 2 and 6 feet wide at its base and anywhere from 3 to 15 feet high. Atop this earthen base is a tangle of trees, shrubs, and prickly brambles, essentially creating all natural fences around the small fields, generally no bigger than an American football field. The hedgerow country grew organically over the centuries, well before train or automobile transportation. The fields were generally irregular in shape, as you can see up here. None of them are perfect squares, few of them are perfect rectangles, and they all intersect each other at strange angles. And narrow wagon lanes between the hedges twisted and turned throughout the countryside. As historian Stephen Ambrose wrote, no terrain in the world was better suited for defensive action in World War II than the hedgerows. German defenders could station large cannon and field guns in the curve of a narrow, sunken farm lane and destroy any American tanks coming up the path. German infantry could dig into the sides of the hedges and use the foliage and natural camouflage of their positions. German snipers could hide high up in the trees and have full view of each small battlefield. This was important territory for American forces to take as they pushed from the beaches south to the important transportation hub of St. Lo. Now, where were these hedgerows? This is Normandy. This is the Cotentin Peninsula with the port of Cherbourg. As you see, first U.S. and second British, these are the Normandy beaches that you're so familiar with from the opening of Saving Private Ryan and stuff. So it's really, as soon as you get past the beaches and start fighting out onto shore, all of these places where you find line are bocage or hedgerow. And all of this was going to be incredibly difficult to get through. As it says down here, the hedgerow country of France does not have formal borders, but it basically stretches inland, encompassing most of the Cotentin Peninsula and then moving in towards Falaise, Argenton, and Alençon. The area was seen as critical to Allied plans in order to take the city of St. Lo, which you can see right here, which was among the most important communication and transportation hubs in the region, and it was the key to breaking out towards Paris. Paris is off this way. You have to take St. Lo to cut off this peninsula where we hope to reinforce, and to start marching out this way past Falaise, past Alençon, and towards Paris, France. So I want you to think about a couple things right now. What are some of the specific characteristics of the hedgerows that would have made them tough to attack? As we looked at those photographs, what would have made it tough for you as an attacker to take one of these small battlefields? Second, I want you to think about what are specific ways the German defenders could use the terrain to their advantage. All of these small little hills, all of the prickly bushes, all the trees, all the high trees, what are some of the ways they were able to use that to their advantage? And finally, what was the goal? Why was it important for American forces to push through this very difficult country? As you think about the answers to those questions, I'm going to talk a little bit about American preparedness to take the hedgerows. We were not prepared for this. We weren't in any way. So again, allow me to read this, but if you choose to read it on your screen and pause my annoying voice, that's perfectly fine. Many scholars have debated why exactly American forces were so unprepared in combat in the hedgerows. Top American armed forces officials knew about the hedgerows and in fact had aerial photographs of the region clearly showing how it was broken up into little fields surrounded by trees and bush. Despite Allied planners' awareness of the nature of the bocage, wrote Army historian Michael Doubler, American commanders had done little to prepare their units for fighting among the hedgerows. Even the maps soldiers carried into combat did not reveal the treacherous nature of the landscape. Army map makers, under pressure to get maps produced to distribute to the combat forces, were allowed to leave out, quote, much fine detail, such as hedgerows, read the Army's official history of World War II. While some senior officers had a vague idea the hedgerows existed, few passed this on to the junior officers who would lead the regiments, battalions, and companies tasked with fighting through this land. Neither junior nor senior officers had done much, if anything, to train their troops how to attack a hedgerow. Many of the tactics would be learned on the fly and would be learned at a great cost to American forces. Fighting in the hedgerows, historian Stephen Ambrose described, was like fighting in a maze. Platoons got separated from one another in the initial moves of an assault. The 83rd Infantry Division was committed to combat for the first time in late June of 1944. Patrols of men got lost in the hedgerows. Sometimes a company would move forward, only to find out they had gone more than 10 football fields further than their comrades, and were in danger of being completely cut off. So, to finish off this first mini lesson, I want you to think about a few things. Whose responsibility was this? Who was responsible for the unpreparedness of American troops as we go into Normandy in June of 1944? Second, kind of giving that last one, sanding off the edges of it a little bit, is it possible in a war to be prepared for anything? Or do you kind of admit the minute that you go into war or any other situation in life that you can't be prepared for everything? So, in our next lesson, we're going to talk about how you prepare for the stuff that you can't always prepare for. Thanks for sticking with me in this first episode, and be well.